Yesterday we ended in the afternoon with a question that never got answered, and that was where to start. I think where to start, this is a good place. I think the reason the Academy came to the conclusion that we need to start not with policy and institutions, we need to start with theory. And if we're starting with theory, we need to understand, as Earth and both have said, that any theory is based on a conceptual framework, it's based on a social construction, it's based on implicit assumptions and implicit values. And we need to be conscious, we need to make those much more conscious. And if there's a problem today in economics, as there is in all subjects, it is that this has been suppressed. This is not where we're discussing. This is not what we're learning. This is not what we're being made conscious of. So I think this is a central issue in being aware of what are the foundations of society, of the need for an integrated theory of society, and understanding what are the foundations of the existing social system. It's not a question of capitalism. It's not a question of market economy. It's a question of the society and the values that are being expressed through money, through markets, through corporate structures and systems. And as Borkman, who I mentioned yesterday, who is the Swede who was in partnership with Goldman Sachs and made millions of dollars. I didn't tell you the end of the story. When he really saw what was going on, he sold his bank and he set up a foundation in Sweden to really promote a change in view. And he's recently published a book on myth of the market, and his main theme was, this is the way the market is working is not the only way it can work. The way it's working is not the way the theory says. The way it's really working is determined by underlying currents of power in the society. And the same market system, the same theory, can work very differently. We can have a very different market. So nothing we're saying need to be construed that we're rejecting the wonderful creations and power that a market, empowering creativity of a market system. Second point I'd like to make is that what we're talking is nothing new. When we talk about evolutionary economics, my view, I use the term a little differently, but my view is we need to understand the present economic system in an evolutionary perspective. And it's not just an evolution of technology. It's not just an evolution from local to global. It's a social evolution. And what is that evolution? It's a very clear process over generations and millennium. We are moving from an extreme concentration of power to a distribution of power. And we are moving from power which traditionally was defined physically. Whoever is stronger, the rule of the jungle, the might is right, the military conqueror who Britain built a worldwide empire on the capacity to take it. And that was legitimate at one time. We've gone there, we've conquered them, we own it, and I mentioned Britain not to single them out, but since I lived in India so long, it's prominent in my mind. And we delegitimize the physical forms of power more and more. We've gone from the physically strongest person to the landed aristocracy who owned the physical property, who only the aristocracy could vote, to a system in which whoever had the capacity to do more, to have more influence, to gain political influence, we have moved to a rights-based, a more of a mental principle, a rights-based system of society in which we recognize the governing principles of society shouldn't be who's got the most physical strength or who's got the oldest lineage or who owns the most land, but principles of equality, principles of universality, principles of human dignity. So we're not talking about anything new. We've abolished slavery because it was inconsistent with this evolutionary direction. And therefore, an evolutionary economics should be seen in view of an evolutionary view of society, and I think the direction of that evolution is very clear. What's our problem today is that each movement in the evolution and the complexity of society not only spreads power as it has, the internet has distributed so much power, the mobile phone has distributed, democracy has distributed, but it's creating new forms of power. And when those new forms of power come, there is a tendency, a human tendency, for whoever can get it to take it and utilize it for their own advantage. And it takes different forms in different generations. And we see that today. I see it in developing countries, how the lower classes, when they get political influence, they make corruption a way of life because they're using the political system to gain enormous wealth and enormous illicit power in the society. We condemn corruption because it's illegal. But what we have today in Western society, supported by theory, is, as I think one or both of the speakers, we've got a plutocratic system in which legal seizure of power, a legal concentration of power, is supported by the legal system. In the U.S., our corporations have been given the rights to vote, or essentially the rights of voters, regardless of who owns the corporation, whether they're even American or not. We've got a tremendous concentration of economic power in the society, which is against the very fundamental principles of competition. And there's a lot of documentation of it, research to show how much that concentration is growing. The mergers and acquisitions show that. This is against the evolutionary direction. But unfortunately, we've got a theory that's, the neoliberal part of it is supporting something that's archaic, backward, against the evolutionary direction, and can only lead to social upheaval, social unrest, and increase in conflict until it's addressed. And as I mentioned yesterday, we've got the move from national to internet to global markets. It's created a wild west of lack of regulation, and that lack of regulation is being used by countries, by corporations, by wealth, to seize undue power. So I think we talked in the beginning, the first morning, about the need to look at not only economy as a physical system and a social system, it's based on consciousness. Our consciousness as human beings is evolving, and one of the clear directions of that is we're evolving from being physical and justifying things physically to recognizing there are mental principles or spiritual principles on which our existence should be based. We said our theory needs to be value-based, and Winston has made it very clear how powerful is that notion that we need a value-based system of economy. We say it should be human-centered, and both of them have made it very clear. The benefit, it's not for wealth's sake. It's not production for production's sake. It is how much is this system really serving human beings.